Hey guys, this is Zane here, back at it with another episode of watching Monster House every single day of the month with my friends because I want them to. And we actually have a pretty, well, I was gonna say it's a hefty topic, but at the same time it's not inherently super hefty, but I've got quite a lot to say. Sorry for the chair squeak. I'll have to do something about that, but I've had this chair for so long that I don't know, it's almost a little bit too late to get a different, or is it too late, ever really too late to get like a different chair? I'm not really sure, but that's totally besides the point. So today we're on day like 13ish roughly, not including the days off. And yeah, as I mentioned before, I'll take Mondays off, although today is not Monday, it's Tuesday. No, Wednesday. It's Wednesday. Sorry, I'm losing track of my days ever since school finished. I went from 100 to 0, and I'm like, well, trying to figure out a good way to spend my time. And let me tell you that my creativity has gone down a whole lot. It's basically just really bad artist block all the way through. But I mean, you do what you can. On the plus side, we got good news that BC might start opening stuff up again, but I know I personally won't be going out until I know everything is totally safe, because I don't want to be one of those people to accidentally ruin it for other people that need it more than I do. And I mean, I miss going outside and everything and seeing all my friends, but you gotta play it safe. I don't want it to end up being the butt end of the joke like America currently is for how things are going there. But we do have a relatively lower number of cases, and I think we're pretty much like at like a flat at the moment. I think maybe gotten one new case over the past couple days, and I know BC's ranked pretty low for deaths per million in regards to I think it's all over North America, including a lot of places in America, which is really nice. Am I really here to talk about coronavirus with you guys? No, but I think it's certainly a pertinent topical discussion to be had during these times. And I mean, pretty much the main reason why I'm doing this right now is because I'm stuck inside. And I said if we were stuck inside for another month, then I'd do a review of Monster House every single day for, I don't know if I necessarily said for a whole month, but at this point, like, I'd be dumb not to. So, and I think I've also, since I don't want to be running two separate podcasts together at the same time, like I was thinking with Monster May or something of the sort like that, it might be interesting to look into Kaijun, mixing like, Kaijus in June, going for giant monster movies every single day of June, and doing a little discussion based on that. I think that'd actually be pretty fun. And it would also open up a lot more opportunity to do, I don't know, if I'm watching a different movie every couple days with a friend, it'll be easier to get someone on board to talking about it, and I can frequently have someone come back on. I mean, I am like roughly like 8% of all the episodes of this show so far have a friend, but like, I'll get there. I'm a little bit shy when it comes to asking people, and nervous when it comes to trying to come up with questions and asking people to come on. It's a little bit more difficult for myself than I expected it to be. But I do promise you'll get a change up in content. And I feel like I'm doing a pretty okay job with, how much content there is for a movie that's an hour and a half long. And I'm still finding a bunch of new stuff every single day. And so far I've gotten to like 35-ish 100 words in the entire document. So I'm getting there. I've written more for this than I have in a lot of different school projects that I've had over the past couple years. Like 3,500 words is quite a lot. I've got 12 pages of stuff. But hey, finding something new every time is exciting. And if I can make it this far, I have pretty low, my scare of running out of content is going less and less as the days go by. Within the first couple days, I was like, oh my gosh, there's absolutely no way that I'm going to be able to drag this out without going insane. But when I realized how nice it is to take good notes in regards to stuff, you get so much more to actually like talk about and discuss. And instead of just saying like 2 words, like, let's see. I'm gonna go. Sorry if you can hear the mouse. I'm gonna scroll up to roughly the top of my notes, and here for the very first day of talking points, here are the notes that I took: conception, animation, characters, soundtrack, who it was made by, actors, and then I just listed a couple of the different actors. Not as good as Imagine Party Babies. Maggie Gyllenhaal plays herself, and then like, underneath, Steve Buscemi is wholesome and good. So I think I've definitely made a huge step up. And then going into the next day, the next day, because I did have Cameron's stuff for the second day, but then I had to redo that, so I took even more notes, and they get a little bit more in depth, all bullet points. Then eventually took out the bullet points for the going over the game stuff. And then character or hero's journey stuff, and then I went into interviews and whatnot. So my note taking has improved a lot and given me significantly more topic and sentences to actually work with. So I hope this doesn't come off as like me talking inorganically when I'm reading off of a bunch of different notes, but I think my confidence is significantly higher when I'm not saying and like and stopping or being quiet for I don't know, long periods of time. I didn't even realize that I said as much as I sort of did until I started listening over these things again, because I always feel super confident when it comes to school presentations. So for all I know, maybe I'm really, really good at those, and I don't say all that often. And here I am being like when I, have one topic that I have to stretch over for, I don't know, 15 hours, roughly. Yeah, about 15 hours of content. And when you put it that way, talking for 15 hours is a lot. Especially, but you know what? I know what I'm getting myself into, and I know what I've got myself into. So here we are. So we're already late into this, and I haven't even given the topic of what I'm actually going to be talking about today. But today we're actually going to be going over an interview specifically with Gil Kenan, the main director for this. And I believe these were asked during a live second screening of the movie. It looked like the interview was posted in like 2013-ish though, so it was pretty late. I didn't actually look too much into it past just watching the video. It's like 37 minutes. And it was actually gave a lot of information, because in the behind the scenes you don't really see Gil talking all that often. So it's actually really good. So I'll get right down into the nitty gritty of it. A lot of talking points. I guess they either just watched the movie or watched something of his and had a discussion on the movie afterwards, where they sat basically at the front of the theater and asked questions from the audience, and had the interviewer himself had a couple questions. It was done extremely well, especially in comparison to talking to the kid actors. So I can appreciate it a lot for that. So I believe what Gil's first thesis, so before he graduated from, I think he said it was UCLA, he had to write a thesis and do a little short movie by himself, which he filmed entirely in his kitchen. And I believe it had something to do with a burglar. And he liked that idea because as a child, his house got burglarized. Is that the right way to say it? But having someone like invade your own like home, and the feeling of like your little domestic space being invaded, gave him a lot of ideas for like certain things to do for Monster House. And it was a really good exploration on that same idea. Once again, I forgot to take break the targets out of here, but we'll fast action this. We'll kick it up a notch. So after one of the screenings of his little short movies, because I'm not entirely sure how film school and stuff like that works, but I guess, you're looking for a job after your school's done, so you have to put your way out there. So he was doing a screening for one of his movies, and an agent was there asking if he could send them a tape after everything was done. And that got passed around a whole bunch. And I guess he got a call from Robert Zemeckis one day saying he wanted to meet and discuss something. And he sent Gil pretty much a super, super, super rough draft of Monster House. And it was extremely bare bones, super basic script. Main concept was basically the neighborhood house was alive. and that was pretty much just the gist of it, and that's all he had to work with. And that's a pretty heavy undertaking, especially because of how much of a fan he was of Robert Zemeckis. He mentioned that as a kid, his brother and himself came up with like a whole, I don't know, I guess it was a poster, and they linked all of the Back to the Future movies. As if you aren't too sure, Robert Zemeckis was the person that came up with Back to the Future. So he and his brother came up with this giant poster board type thing, connecting all the different things together to check for plot holes, and no matter which way they did it, they couldn't seem to find any. I'm sure nowadays people have looked super, super far into Back to the Future and probably picked out a couple plot holes. Not Robert. Back to the Future on its own, I could spend a whole month talking about just the first one. I guarantee. There's so much information out there and all the stuff it's influenced pop culture. So that's pretty neat. But anyways, when he was meeting up with Robert Zemeckis, he was like fanboying pretty hard, but he made an analogy to how something to do with Dumbo and the Feather, and he was able to put the like art and stuff of the movie between the two of them, so they had a place to talk about, so he wasn't just freaking out the entire time, which I thought was pretty cute. Because I mean, if I was in the same position, I'd probably be doing the same thing and freaking out that someone you have always looked up to and is, I don't know, that talented, is giving you the time of day and wants your help with something. That's nuts. And he, all things considered, he mentioned that he was realizing, or he sort of realized how lucky he was, but he wanted to just put his head down and work on this as hard as he possibly could before he gave himself like the chance to doubt what he was doing and have everything come crashing down. So he stayed confident and hardworking all the way through until it was all finished, which seemed to be actually a really good idea, because he didn't freak out too much about how much he had like working with these two massive people, Zemeckis and Spielberg, and he was able to get all of the stuff done that he wanted to get done. And he mentioned that he started with a really, really tiny budget and a room. He was able to hire a bunch of artists and a storyboard artist, and they designed the movie within, I think, 2 or 3 months, he said. So, given the small like idea of the house and stuff coming alive, they came up with everything completely from scratch. All the character ideas and visuals, and you can see from the concept art, they held super true to that. And pretty much the entire process of how the movie was going to play out was written all by him and with the help of storyboard artists and whatnot, which is super, super impressive, because that even goes back on what I was saying, how the concept art managed to, I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for. It transitioned super, super well into a 3D environment, going strictly from a 2D one. They adapted it like ridiculously well, because he didn't talk anything on this interview about the actors and how he had his like specific wish lists and stuff, but they got the pretty much perfect characters to portray each of the characters that they had already designed, which is nuts. So a really good thing that came from this was that the producers, so when I'm mentioning producers, it's like Zemeckis and Spielberg, they totally understood that a movie like that had to, like, they couldn't really have put a whole bunch of control over the people working on it, because with an idea like that, you have to have really good creative freedom. So Gil was extremely lucky that they weren't pressing him to do a bunch of changes and stuff. He mentioned something how working on the movie wasn't corporate at all, and it was just total free will and creative freedom, which is insane, because I can't imagine that's all too likely these days. And especially for being pretty much the first movie like doing motion cap, and I think it mentioned one of Sony's like first animated things of the time. So that's nuts. Sorry, had an itch. But they let him basically do whatever he wanted with the script that they gave him. And I gotta say that worked out extremely, extremely well in this movie's favor. The temporary compositions for music-wise were made years before the movie was even finished. I believe he still got the same person, Douglas Pipes, who did the full-on soundtrack for the movie. I think he had him come up with just some short mock-up stuff to go with a few of their rough drafts for sketches and animation stuff. And I don't think they might have stuck with a couple of them because they were that good, but I don't think it was super clear on that. Let's see. Oh, there we go. They wanted to have Gil set the tone for the movie all on himself, as it actually wasn't necessarily pitched as a horror movie or kids movie, just with a set idea. And they didn't even have it set to specifically be an animated movie of itself, which that's pretty cool. Gil got a lot of his spent a lot of his childhood watching movies and stuff, so he felt like he could find a good way to balance comedy and horror super well, because there's definitely a ton of movies out there that have an absolutely horrendous time of balancing it. I watched Leprechaun the other day, and I can't really tell if it's supposed to be horror or comedy, because it doesn't walk the fine tightrope very well. It's really up and down like crazy. They've got the gore and everything that would go with horror typically, but the movie itself is just so not serious. And I'm sure a lot of other monster movies of the same type, you can say the same thing. Like Tremors walking the super fine line but doing a great job of it. And then you get like slasher films and all that jazz. But he knew the way he wanted it to be balanced with just the right amount of both, where you can set a nice dark tone revolving around kids, but it's not just a super family friendly movie all the way through. And the interviewer mentioned not being able to take his nieces and nephews to go see the movie because it's a little bit too spooky at parts. And I can't even specifically remember as a kid if I got super scared watching the movie or not, but I do remember it was way creepier than I expected. To go back and watch the movie for a first time, I wish. I need to watch this movie again in theaters if ever given the opportunity. I think that'd be really nice. Anyways, Gil thinks that, or even said so himself, that animation is basically the perfect way to do horror movies. You're given the ability to create the world exactly how you'd want it to be, how you want it to look, how the tone feels, and you're able to work with all of the environment at your disposal. And when it comes to live action, you're limited a lot, especially when it comes to filming at certain times of day, it being too dark and whatnot. You're able to control these different factors extremely well in animation, and I can totally agree with him on that. I can't really think of all too many horror animated movies, like not even off the top of my head I'm able to. I wouldn't inherently consider this one because it's more kid based, but like if you're leaning towards adults, I can't really think of all that much. You'd lean maybe towards, there's this music video I'm pretty sure everyone got exposed to way too young as a kid, but I think it's called DYE Fantasy, and the kids go into like an abandoned pool that looks like it's maybe attached to a school, and there's like tentacles coming out and stuff like that. It's super weird, but I can't super think of anything specific like that. Maybe there's something in Love, Death, and Robots that you can equate that to, but I don't know why I'm drawing so many blanks for that. He mentions that the movie is, a good description would be a wonderful terror, which is nice and actually describes it really well. You've got the nice whimsical childlike feel to the environments and everything, while also the overarching impending feeling of doom that is the house and all the dangers that there is around them. And he also mentioned that most of the animation that is over here in the West is super focused around kids, and at any given point can break out into song and dance. And he's very, very true about that. Maybe that's a little bit less so these days, but you have to think maybe around 2003-ish, let's say. Around 2003, that was the case. Animated cartoons and stuff pretty much were made to focus solely on selling toys for the most part. That's the whole reason Cowboy Bebop got made. You've got Transformers and everything. He-Man. Anything around those lines. All focused around selling toys. Disney movies always broke out into song. any animated movie in general pretty much had a song part to it, and this is a nice exception to that. He didn't really have much of an experience with animation until he started watching experimental like animated student films a little bit later on in his like school career, and he found them really fascinating and wanted to learn how to do that properly. So he wanted to focus specifically on compelling characters in like monster movies, which is usually the way it goes. If the monster itself is interesting, you have to have some other things to back it up, because it can't just be about the monster. Like, let me think, what's a good monster movie? If you count Cabin in the Woods, the characters are interesting enough and they're all dynamic. I don't know, they're all interesting and you could root for almost any of them at any given point. So you care about them enough. So compelling characters is super, super important. And he mentioned it here. I might skip this song if I can. Sorry. But he mentions that in animated movies with a lot of kids and stuff, there is pretty much always a gag for each of the characters, and that never ever translates well into live action stuff. I can't think of a specific example when it comes to like a gag or what he was specifically referring to, but I can sort of understand the idea he's trying to get across. And I hope you guys can too, because I don't know a good way of explaining it. I'm sorry. He did mention, someone asked him about live action and if the movie could be done in that way. And he mentioned that the first 30 minutes of the movie could easily be done within live action, but anything past that would be totally ridiculous. And a huge part of that would be you having like Nebuchadnezzar in the house within the same frame in a live action scenario. Just, you wouldn't be able to convey any sort of real emotion between these two characters that's a house and a real life person. And especially when you're having just like the kids in the house, it just wouldn't work. You'd have to have some other sort of elements there. And I can totally agree with that. Although the technology might be a bit better these days, and it could work as a live action with those animated sort of segments of the house working in. But I almost don't want this to be ruined with the really high chance that it just doesn't work out. But maybe if you got the right writer and a really good monster designer, it could work. Especially with how coming of age thriller type things are happening, like Stranger Things and whatnot. People are pretty excited at the concept of that. So maybe, maybe there's a chance that it could. And he also mentioned that the exact same time as he was working on Monster House, Polar Express was also like in development. So they were working at the exact same time. So Robert Zemeckis was working on 2 different animated projects, and I think Polar Express was probably motion capped as well. So he was working with 2 of the almost same medium. And I mean, Polar Express is probably more considered to be a classic these days in comparison to Monster House, but you've got people like me talking about how Monster House is, so it's got that going for it. And I think that, okay, that's mostly what he talked about when it comes to the animation. So when it came to actually filming the movie, he made sure that every single one of the actors were present for each other's performances. And so when the characters are delivering their lines, they're not just sitting in a sound booth and just talking to a wall. They're actually like talking to someone. And it gives off the proper way of conveying emotions and stuff, especially since the faces were motion capped. And I learned that the balls they put on their faces are, I think, called reflecting bulbs. So they reflect stuff back. I never totally understood how it worked, but now I do. But as I was saying about giving off emotion, yeah, they had to have everyone present so you could see everyone's facial animations and actually deliver and act a scene out. I could only imagine if they had no one actually there that everything would probably be a lot more difficult to work with. So they actually did have Kathleen Turner there for all of like Steve Buscemi's parts when they were talking between the house and Nebuchadnezzar. But I don't believe Kathleen did any of her lines until I believe, as I mentioned, way later on in the development, basically after all of it was already finished animated, or the entire animation was already finished for the movie. And Gil also mentioned that focusing solely on the characters rather than how they looked gave him an opportunity to do casting a lot differently. So they didn't start off with how the characters looked style-wise and stuff. They focused a lot on the development of how the characters worked throughout the movie. And that was a really good way of doing it, because if the characters were not exciting, then I wouldn't want to make my way through the movie whatsoever, because it's so focused on them and their little chemistry. So it was, I don't know, it worked really, really well for that regard. And talking about the soundtrack, he says he met Douglas Pipes at UCLA when he was working on one of his short films, and he put out a little, basically stapled something to a thing and said, looking for someone to, who can work fast and free for a little bit to help work on a quick score for one of his short films. That probably wouldn't fly as much these days, but if you maybe just need like something done in about 10 or 20 minutes, maybe it's not all that bad. And he offered to help him record stuff when one of his friends, I'll separate the two. So Gil had a friend who was able to play the cello, or not inherently able to play it, but had a cello. So they were going to help him work on doing like a backing score or something for it, or just play something for it. And Douglas Pipes also offered to help them record it. And he basically took over the entire thing. He wrote an entire score for them, and also played the piano to help teach the other person how to play the cello and all their notes. So he wrote, instructed, and recorded the entire soundtrack for the dude's short film in a very, very short amount of time, which is insane. So we also got Douglas Pipes to do the soundtrack for Monster House as well, and he did a phenomenal job. That dude is actually crazy good. I'm not entirely sure what other things he's done, but that's pretty nuts. And when someone asked him if he'd go back and change anything about the movie, he mentioned, sorry, I had to get some water. I'm getting more and more dried up from talking so much. He said that he feels like he did the best he could with what he had, using the college parent analogy of raising your kids when they go off to college. You did the best you did and sent them off on their own way so they can do their own things. And he feels that it's really important to say that the film is what it is, it's finished, and it's time to move on to other things. So he doesn't look back at things he could have done better, because he thinks he did the best for what he did. And that's a really nice way to look at it, because he's happy with it, and that's good to know. He mentioned that he worked for almost 2 years with the animators specifically to get the movie done, and he went on a nice talk about how important the animators were and all of the effort that they did, made sure, and without him, the movie definitely wouldn't be the same thing it was. They made sure all the life was there within the characters and how everything looked. And they really did do a fantastic job with that. A lot of the stuff holds up really, really well, and establishing shots look still great. And he also worked for only 40 days with the actors for filming. So they managed to film that entire thing line-wise and stuff relatively short. Although, if you are working full-time, coming in every single day at 7 a.m. to get stuff done, 40 days, that is a decent amount. But given all of that to work first and then move on to the animation, gives you a lot of free time. So I think my fair assumption of the movie being filmed a lot earlier, before 2000... I forgot how long it takes to actually make a movie, but I think I said that they started it maybe in 2003-ish, and that's why the kids look so young, was a pretty fair assumption to make. And holy crap, I'm already basically at 30 minutes. I talked a lot. I talked fast, and there was just a lot to cover. So I think, sorry to end it so fast and abrupt, but I guess it's most likely a good time to end things off here. This will be one of the longer episodes we've had in a little bit. So this has been Zane here. I really appreciate you listening. I'd like to give this movie a 10 Gil Keenans out of 10 Gil Keenans. And hey, maybe I'll see if I can find a way to get in touch with the man. That'd be really cool. Hope you're all having a good night and staying safe. I'll see you guys on the flip side. Bye.